All right, I'm going to go ahead and get it started. So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar with Fjorge and Znode. My name is Dee and I run marketing at Fjorge. I organized this webinar, so I'm just going to do some quick housekeeping and then I'll pass it off to Tom and Joe. So a recording of this webinar will be sent to everybody who registered. Expect to see that by the end of the day, and feel free to recirculate it however you'd like. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to just throw it in the chat and I will work on making sure that those get answered. Otherwise, we also have a designated Q&A portion at the end of this webinar. We'll reserve about like 15 minutes to let the audience ask any questions that they might have. So if you want to wait till then, feel free as well. Otherwise, you can do it throughout the webinar. So yeah, without further ado, take it away, Joe.
Thanks, Dee. Just quick housekeeping item, D, for you. So I know from the past that we've had, there's chat and a Q&A option on Zoom. Do you have a preference if they put their questions in the chat or the Q&A section? It's kind of the same thing. Do you have a preference?
I can see both of them, so whichever one.
Okay, great, perfect. All right, so thank you all for joining us. I think another quick housekeeping item is that we don't intend to take the entire hour, and I just want to run through an agenda and then we'll do some introductions. So obviously housekeeping is taken care of. Both myself and Tom will go through our personal experiences and then a little bit about Fjorge and Znode and how we came together. And then we're going to hit on a few different things as far as B2B e-commerce and e-commerce in general, and also how marketers use these tools. And we'll talk about a multi-channel approach. And then, of course, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. But do not hesitate to send questions as we go along in the chat and the Q&A, and if it's relevant, we will answer them as we go, or Dee may interject with a great question on a particular topic while we're doing it. So thank you for coming, and we'll get started. So Joe Barsness is my name. I am here at Fjorge as the Director of New Business. I've been here for 9 years. And my background now is in technology and sales, and I've done project management, anything from software sales to websites to e-commerce, really anything in kind of the custom world is where my background has come, and then being consultative along the client journey. So we'll dive into Fjorge in a minute, but I'll let Tom who is willing to come and join us on this call and talk about yourself, Tom, a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Joe. My name is Tom Flierl. Hello, everyone. I am the VP of Sales and Marketing at Amla Commerce. That's our parent brand and the creator of Znode, which is one of the products in our suite of products. I've been with the company for about 4 years running sales and marketing. Prior to the software world, I actually grew up in the agency world. So I have a lot of background and experience working with marketers. I spent about 12 years in the agency world. 7 of those 12, I was working on content-driven initiatives in the healthcare space and in the financial space, targeting consumers. And the last 5 years prior to joining Amla Commerce, I worked at a digital agency and largely worked with consumer-facing brands that sold through independent dealers and retailers on their overall digital strategy, go-to-market strategy in digital. So that included e-commerce, it included some other components of it, but helping companies that sell through channels connect with consumers.
All right, for those, many of you may know who we are here at Fjorge, but for those of you who don't, we are a digital consultancy dev partner for many agencies, but we also take on design and development projects for clients directly as well. We have roughly 70 employees in the Minneapolis and Chicago markets, and we're helping our clients in most cases bring a digital product to life that can take on many different meanings to different folks, but a growing part and a good amount of our experience is building B2B and B2C e-commerce platforms, which we're going to focus on today, and how we are able to help our clients meet their expectations and grow their online business through different tools and teams and options as we go through. So highest level about fjorge, and I'll pass it along to Tom to talk a little bit more about Znode.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Joe. So quick introduction to Znode. Znode is a multi-channel B2B e-commerce platform. And the platform's been around since 2003, so it has quite a history. However, Amla Commerce, our parent company, we acquired Znode in 2014 and have done a lot of product development to the product. And the platform's growing very fast. It has been adopted by a number of Fortune 500 companies and has some pretty unique, I would say, future-facing features to it that are, I would say, just less common in the market, but will be common in the market in the next couple of years. And you know, I'm grateful that we have the ability to talk about how Znode can help marketers. I'm going to focus a little bit less on Znode, and I'm going to focus on what the life of marketers looks like today. And I'll try and relate Znode back to how Znode as a product can assist. But I'm coming from a premise as we start to talk in this webinar. I guess 3 points in the premise is that, one, the people who are watching this webinar have a variety of experiences. There's probably people who've grown up in traditional marketing roles and are now getting thrown into e-commerce. And it may be B2C, it may be B2B, it may be that they're getting their feet wet in all areas of the business. Two, I'm coming from the premise that the role and demand of marketers is changing and it's increasing greatly. And marketers have to have a much different view of customer experience than they did 5 to 10 years ago. And I'm also coming from the premise, as we talk today, is that all commerce now is e-commerce. You know, I would say 5 years ago that statement may not be true, but today, coming out of the pandemic with the wide adoption to everything moving to digital, all commerce is e-commerce one way or another. Even if you go into a store today, you probably have searched for a product before going into that store. And the product that arrived in the store probably came in because that store owner either refilled their shelves using EDI or some sort of electronic transmission of information to buy the product, or maybe they logged into a portal and they ordered the product in bulk and it was shipped to them. So one way or another, e-commerce is touching all forms of commerce. And that's part of what we're going to talk about, because that has huge implications for marketers and in general, any business leader today. So I'm going to start off, and I'm actually going to see if we get any additional comments here from people who are in the webinar. But when you think about traditional concerns of marketers, I have a hierarchy here. I borrowed a little Maslow hierarchy of needs, but you know, it starts with the basics. Most marketers have always been concerned around things like content, easily managing content, and brand experiences. That's marketing 101, particularly with brands. And then, you know, as marketers have taken on more and gotten deeper into e-commerce, merchandising, promotions, things of that nature, product information certainly have come into play. And then as you get to the top of the hierarchy, things like segmentation, serving up the right product to the right person when they're shopping. I'm actually going to pause for a minute here and see if there's any questions or anyone wants to drop into Q&A or chat if they want to drop any other concerns that are relevant for the audience today, because we're going to get a lot deeper than this in the next couple of minutes. Or Joe, do you have anything you think we should add?
I was just trying to come up with something. I didn't know you were going to quiz me on it. I'm trying to think from our digital perspective. You know, I think the biggest thing that we hear from our particular clients is the ability for a marketer to do what they want to do in terms of content management.
Sure.
Like, I don't want to have to call a developer every time I want to change an image. I know that that's 5 years ago, but I think it goes beyond that in B2B e-commerce. It's setting up a new channel. It's updating pricing information in bulk. It's all of those sorts of things. And so I don't know if you're going to touch on that in the content management piece, but that would be like what we hear about as what concerns marketers have as we think about building an experience for them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I would just say let's keep the conversation open as we go through this, and if anyone wants to jump into chat or Q&A and submit any questions or thoughts, let's leave that open, and we can certainly address content management as we continue to walk through this. Because personalization is a big component of content management. We're going to talk about what that means more as we walk through this. So when you think about the concerns of marketers, how that applies in the traditional world of B2C e-commerce is it's somewhat simplistic from an e-commerce perspective. So when you think about a traditional brand, I'm actually wearing a Patagonia jacket. So I'm going to talk about Patagonia is not a customer of ours, but it's a brand everybody knows. But when Patagonia is selling direct online to consumers, they basically have somewhat of a simple set of needs. They have a single web store. They probably have their product catalog and their product information all stored in their e-commerce platform. So there's not a lot of need for integration into third-party systems. They have pretty consistent pricing. They have MSRP pricing. Maybe they do run some promotions. Patagonia, being a premium brand, probably doesn't do a lot of discounting, but they have an annual sale where they take a percentage off or they discount some items. So maybe manipulate pricing a little bit based upon promotions. Pretty much limited content management needs at that point. They do need to have their product information updated. They may want to change the experiences, but for the most part, the store is there for shopping. Patagonia may also have a CMS system on top of that. They do publish a lot of content around their belief system, supporting outdoor causes, etc. And they more than likely have some form of personalization based upon behavior. And this is very common B2C e-commerce. So based upon how that shopper is, what they're looking at, if they hit men's or women's or children's, they get additional products served up based upon the types of things that they're looking at. If they're looking at men's coats, there's probably going to be recommendations for other men's coats to look at, for example. And these are some of the differences we're seeing as marketers take on more and more in their roles. And that premise is that, everything is commerce now. So now B2B e-commerce starts to come into play. But for marketers, B2B e-commerce has very different implications, because now, as you mentioned, Joe, now we're talking about multiple channels. If you want to take that Patagonia example, Patagonia also more than likely has a B2B store where their independent dealers can log in and order products. They probably are also syndicating content to some of their major retailers like REI, and they have to push their catalog out. I'm pretty sure that they still have a specific unit of their business that offers personalized goods where a corporation put their logo on a Patagonia jacket. So they have many different channels. And what that typically means is they probably are managing multiple web stores. That could mean that they're managing multiple platforms, and each platform has its own individual store. And they probably have some other complexities like multiple warehouses, multiple branches that they have to serve. And again, if we get away from Patagonia and you think about a manufacturer distributor, distributors have multiple branches, so they need to be able to show inventory at a branch level. Manufacturers have to ship from warehouses, and they may have to think about other things like where is the most efficient way to ship from a pricing perspective, from shipping costs. And when you get into B2B e-commerce, marketers, e-commerce managers have other more complex needs too, like complex product information. When you think about managing product information for B2B products, they're usually much more intense data is needed. And then you also have kits, bundles, other ways of bringing products to market in B2B that isn't common in B2C. So the data model is much more complex. And then when we talk about things, the real differentiator in B2B is that now instead of having just selling to an end consumer, which has one price, now you have these account pricing issues where, for example, a manufacturer may be buying from a distributor, and that manufacturer has a price that they've negotiated directly with a salesperson that's been in existence for the last 5 to 10 years. So now every different account that logs in has their own unique pricing. And more than likely, every account that logs in has some form of catalog that they typically shop from, and maybe it's based upon the segment that they are. So it's not uncommon for a manufacturer distributor to serve many different segments. And so if it, for example, my dad actually, he's retired now, but he was an MRO purchasing agent at a manufacturing company. So his segment would be, MRO products like maintenance, repair, and operations. Whereas there may be another segment, which may be OEM products or a different type of segment. Maybe it's somebody that reported into the purchasing agent who is running maintenance specifically or cleaning, et cetera. And they may get their own unique catalog. And again, they're going to get that account-based pricing. So lots of differences in what marketers are charged with and what e-commerce managers and business leaders are charged with in B2B e-commerce. And a lot of that means that they have to have the ability to pull data from multiple systems. So when you think about the original slide that we talked about, where we talked about it's a simple single catalog that's being displayed, and a lot of the data is being managed right in the e-commerce platform. Now, marketers are challenged with a lot more as they take on more of the B2B role as well. If they're working for a manufacturer distributor, whether it's a consumer-facing brand or whether it's a true B2B brand, now marketers need, in order to solve these multiple channels, they need a lot more functionality, including they need to pull account pricing typically from an ERP. They're typically having to pull segmentation data from their CRM, and they're using that to serve up personalized experiences, but without the ability to easily integrate into third-party systems and have strong data integrations. They're not able to really fulfill on that concept that really, everything is being driven through e-commerce now, but integrations are a big component of that.
Hey, Tom, this may take us a step back, but I think I have a question that I'm curious about, and hopefully some of our listeners do as well. When you are hearing about clients, just like we are, that maybe will use your software, mm-hmm. What percentage of the B2B world is coming to B2B in general or to your platform with like, this is our first time we got to do B2B and we got to start now doing it, versus, hey, we've been on some other platform and we need to increase our capabilities with all of these things that these B2B specific platforms do? Like, do you know what kind of people are diving into this first time versus coming back for more features?
That's a great question, Joe. I would say there's a couple different profiles of customers that we're seeing right now, and it really is broken down between manufacturers and distributors. Mm-hmm. So in general, the data that I've seen is less than 50% of manufacturers have actually started running e-commerce. So they're I would say that they have older, more traditional business models where maybe they have inside sales reps taking orders or customer service reps taking orders. Now, that number was around 40% pre-COVID. Sure. Now it's, hovering at around 50% and growing fast, as most manufacturers are realizing that they have to have digital transformation and they need to be serving their end customers and their dealers electronically, because all commerce is moving to e-commerce. The data I've seen on distributors is 80% of distributors are already running e-commerce platforms. I've also recently seen a report from Digital Commerce 360 that 40% of distributors actually want to re-platform off their e-commerce platform.
Awesome.
So that gives you a little bit of context. That's actually third-party data, and I can't reference the sources right off the top of my head. I believe it's Digital Commerce 360 are the sources for both.
Sure.
So what's driving that? Well, I think on the manufacturing side, there is a lot of replatforming going on, and that is largely, sometimes it's their first time with buying a platform. Sometimes it's they're replacing a homegrown platform that was built 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, there weren't a whole lot of B2B e-commerce platforms.
Sure. Yep.
Right. And manufacturers are largely just displaying data that was in their ERP. Today, they realize they have to build a customer experience, a brand experience. They have to have products that are shown on a public facing website that's SEO optimized so that they can actually help grow the business. Maybe they're not showing pricing, but they're trying to get new customers.
Yeah.
And they also have to serve their channels. Distributors are largely realizing like they dipped their toe in the water, if you will, 3 to 5 years ago. And now they're selling a lot online, but the platform that they bought 3 to 5 years ago isn't meeting their needs of today and won't meet their needs of tomorrow. And that largely is because there's an evolution of platforms. A lot of these distributors actually were buying B2C platforms because there weren't a lot of B2B options in the past, and they were largely customizing them. So now they're stuck with a marketing team who can't easily publish content. You know, what you had mentioned earlier is you hear a lot about we need to publish content, or maybe the B2C platform can't easily manage catalogs. And so they have some limitations. And so they're looking for better ways to use e-commerce to enable their existing sales reps and engage their existing customers, but also just create a better experience.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for jumping into that. And it's very interesting to me on some of that data and you know, frankly, here at Fjorge, we can feel the replatforming and like, I better keep up with my competition by offering this, and I want to create a better experience for my customer. And that has really taken off in the last 2 years, particularly with B2B. Not that B2C isn't growing as well, but just that world for us is what we're hearing exactly the reasoning behind those decisions. So.
Yeah. I have one other piece of data, and I'm not going to be able to articulate it well, but basically, if you look at the trend line of adoption of e-commerce, the trend line that was in place pre-COVID actually accelerated to a 10-year increase during COVID.
Sure.
That pretty much every company hit the reset button and said, we're going to invest in digital transformation, and we're going to have to change the way that we do business now, because in the B2C side, customers weren't walking into stores, and in the B2B side, sales reps weren't able to get into the door and talk to the purchasing agent or whoever was in charge of buying. And so by default, that trend line just accelerated tenfold because there was no other way to do business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how fast it's taken off, but it certainly makes sense based on the world conditions that we've been through, and it's not going to go backwards.
Right.
It's only accelerated the process. It's not like it was a temporary solution to a temporary problem. It was a solution, a permanent solution that relieved a temporary problem, or at least hope, fingers crossed, temporary problem.
Right. And I think you're also going to see, even coming out of that, some of the pains that I talked about, where distributors 3 to 5 years ago bought a platform and then they outgrew it. Even though everybody's adopting new platforms and going through digital transformation, in the next 2 to 3 years, guess what's going to happen? They're going to realize, oh, wow, my business changed again. And if they haven't purchased a platform that was future-proof or could solve for multi-channel or all the other business concerns that marketers and e-commerce managers are faced with now, they're probably going to be right back at it. And I don't know that this demand for e-commerce platforms and services and thought leadership is going to diminish even in 3 years as we hopefully come out of COVID.
Right.
So this previous slide, I talked about some of the differences when we think about that, single catalog, if you will, to single store. But now in B2B, you have these additional integrations and you have to add a lot more data. That also changes as you think about the complexity of multi-channel and B2B. Is now, instead of just having a single catalog to single store, now suddenly you have to have a whole different level of data model to support B2B e-commerce. It's not uncommon for manufacturers and distributors to, again, serve up a specific content and a specific catalog of based upon who's logged in at the time, right? Or maybe they're running more than one web store because they do have a call it a direct-to-customer store or direct-to-consumer store, where they're optimizing their SEO to get new customers to look at their products, but they're still running a distributor store. And so, this is now the life of a marketer when they're starting to really get engaged at the entire enterprise level of e-commerce. So now it's multi-channel, multi-web stores. And then there's other complexities in B2B e-commerce, like the ability to have multiple warehouses, branches, et cetera, complex product information, all these things that I've already talked about. And that means that the data structure, instead of looking like this, on the back end needs to look a little bit more like this. The ability to manage catalogs easily and apply catalog at a store level or at a user level based upon who that user is that's logging in. Does that make sense?
Certainly does to me, making sure that everybody, if it doesn't, please chat a question in the chat.
Sounds good. So here's where I will talk a little bit more about, the headline was how Znode helps marketers. Is if we went back in the slide and we talked about the kind of simple B2C e-commerce with promotions, et cetera, that is really commoditized functionality nowadays. But when we get into the complexities of B2B and multi-channel e-commerce, there's really three foundations that we look at into how to help marketers. And this is coming from a software platform perspective. So one is I'm going to talk a little bit more about the data model that's necessary for marketers today who are running B2C, B2B, and multi-channel e-commerce. We can talk a little bit about, this concept of, we talked about like replatforming. Why are 40% of distributors looking at new platforms, and why is there this constant churn in technology? And that is talking a little bit differently about technology and thinking about an API first approach where you have a lower total cost of ownership and you get one platform that will grow with your company as your company grows and is easier and has more flexibility. And then finally, there's this other concept of, when we talk about even managing multi-channel, including B2B, is you have to take a look at, there's different needs in B2B that impact customer experience. So when we talk about the traditional concerns of marketers, now everything's wrapped up in customer experience and the customer's first. Well, B2B customers have very, very different needs, and you need to be able to address some of those needs. And so we'll get into a little bit of that as well. And I am going to talk a little bit about Znode, but again, I want to talk about it in terms of like what it means to marketers as marketers continue to take on more and more in this world where all commerce is now e-commerce. So one of the biggest things that we're seeing in e-commerce now is this trend towards personalization. And again, when we talked about B2C, personalization was largely based upon the consumer, what they're shopping for. And again, if you're hitting men's coats, you're going to get some sort of other product offering served up to you based upon your shopping experience. But what's different about B2B is in B2B, you also have the user or logging into an account. And once you have that account information, which is getting pulled from your ERP, now you can serve up true personalization. And so some of the things that are important when we talk about B2B and even B2C now is once that user logs in and they get their account-based information, now the brand and experience can change. So now they get their own unique catalog based upon not only their segment of the type of business they are, but what profile are they within that segment? Are they an MRO purchasing agent? Are they an OEM purchasing agent? Are they somebody who's down on the shop floor who's buying very specific parts for a specific type of machinery, et cetera? So, and along with it, not only does the catalog need to be personalized, so does the content. And clearly so does the pricing because of account-based pricing. But other things all need to be personalized to that unique shopper who logs in at this point. And a lot of that data sits in the e-commerce platform. Some of it's being pulled from an ERP and some of it's being pulled from a CRM. And you can take that very simple model I just mentioned in B2B and you can blow it out now to larger manufacturing companies and global distributors who have to take that same personalization all the way down to what is the local currency, the local language, and what's the local tax code, right? Personalization takes on a whole new meaning in B2B shopping. Some of the ways that Znode does help solve for this is this data model that's built into Znode and inherent in Znode. And I am going to talk a little bit about the product now, but I want to relate it back to the life of an e-commerce manager, a marketer, people who are running e-commerce, because that's now part of their core job. So at the core of Znode is a PIM, a product information management system. And what that PIM allows marketers and managers to do is create catalogs, unlimited numbers of catalogs. It also allows them to easily change product information on the fly, et cetera. There's all the other components of having a PIM in your e-commerce system that's great, but the ability to easily create catalogs, and those catalogs are a virtual sample or a virtual replication of the product's information that's in the PIM. So you're not actually duplicating data when you're creating these catalogs. They're all virtual. And then those catalogs can be applied to a store level in a one-to-many or many-to-one fashion. So it allows for the ultimate personalization of product as well, if that makes sense, and product assortment, again, based upon the user who logs in and what account they belong to. And again, that's all segment data that's carried in the CRM.
Yep.
So the other thing that's unique about Znode is the content management system is actually headless, which means that you can manage content and you can apply a content also based upon who that user is that logs in and what account they are and what profile they are. So I'll go back to my story about my dad. He's the MRO purchasing agent. Not only is he going to get MRO products in his catalog when he logs in, he's also going to get content that's related to him as an MRO purchasing person who runs maintenance. Whereas another type of segment that logs in, or account segment profile that logs in, is going to get a completely different catalog, but also all of the content that is related to them specifically. So personalization takes on a whole new meaning when we're talking B2B e-commerce. And this data model that's in Znode, and the flexibility of the data model allows for that to occur across the board, all the way down to things like shipping, payments, taxes, et cetera, because all these traditional e-commerce entities are detethered and can be applied at a user account or profile level and at a store level.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's the benefit of something like this versus like, well, if you're a B2B buyer, go over here and you get the same thing. Or if you're a B2C buyer, in the simplest form, go over here and you're going to see different pricing and you don't have to log in. It's way more involved in that now, with all the channels, all the options, and truly customizing it to get everybody the right value in terms of people selling the product and the people purchasing, getting the right information at the right time and
Right.
customized. So.
And it goes back to when we were talking about that hierarchy of needs for marketing. Now customer experience is at the top of the hierarchy of needs, and personalization at this level serves that customer experience very effectively, whether it's B2C or B2B. The other unique thing here too is that a lot of B2B companies do have multiple stores, multiple web stores.
Right.
So they may, again, if I go back to my Patagonia example, they may have a B2C store. They may have if it's Patagonia, they may have a uniform store where they have co-branded items, and then they may have their B2B portal. So being able to stand up multiple stores, which is also one of the strengths of Znode, allows you to manage your B2C, your B2B, and your portals all out of one backend administration console and out of one platform. And again, you can apply catalogs and content and experiences as needed based upon the store that they go to and who they are when they log in.
And it can even be very different, correct? Like you could have something almost totally differently branded and different products that you're selling to B2C than you are selling wholesale at B2B, correct?
You can have completely. So one thing I didn't put in here when I talk about these e-commerce entities where I have catalog, content, pricing listed is you can have separate SEO at a store level. You can even have a different theme at a store level, meaning you can completely brand the stores differently and have different shopping experiences, all easily managed out of a central administration console.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep moving because we don't want to spend too much time on this. But the other, big thing when we talk about brand experiences, the flexibility to be able to deliver those easily. And then the other unique thing that you need in running B2B and multi-channel is the ability to integrate in multiple systems, et cetera. And so, and then the third thing is you want to avoid this replatforming thing, right? Like no marketer wants to buy an e-commerce platform this year, spend 6 to 12 months implementing it, and in 3 years go through it all over again. One of the things that having worked with a lot of e-commerce managers and marketers in e-commerce over the last, say 9 years is if I have seen one thing that drives turnover in a company in those positions, it's buying the wrong platform and having to go through re-platforming over and over again. It just burns out teams. It really does. So relating that back to Znode, when we talk about unique brand experiences based upon a store or user account or profile, one of the ways that's possible is Znode is an API first platform. Common name now or common term in e-commerce is headless. So anything that is connecting to Znode is connecting to Znode via an API layer, whether that's a sales app, whether that's a mobile app, whether that's a distribution portal, or whether that's a B2C or a B2B store. All of those are connecting via APIs. And so what that means is marketers have the ability to create unique and also iterate and change brand experiences based upon analytics very easily because the front end is not being rendered out of the platform. It's headless and it's living in the cloud and calling APIs. So lots of flexibility. And also when we talk about personalization and customer experience, this API first approach makes the integration into ERPs, CRMs, third-party data also much easier than traditional platforms because everything is API based now. So now you can grab that data, it's in third-party platforms, bring it into your e-commerce platform, Znode, and you can serve it up in the right experience that is specific to that customer that it logs in or is hitting the site. This is technology. This is like part of the secret sauce to future-facing application or future-facing e-commerce. And then, the third piece is we talked about now that e-commerce marketers and managers are taking on more. When we think about customer experience in the B2B world, they also have to think about the shopping experience is very different.
Right.
It's no longer MSRP pricing listed on the page and maybe you get a promotion or you get some items served up to you based upon what you searched on. First of all, in B2B, site search is the #1 driver of customer experience. So the ability when you get to a site to quickly type in a part number, type in the description of a part and have that brought up immediately is like #1 for customer experience. Znode does have built-in enterprise site search. And the other thing that's unique about that within the Znode platform is if you're running multiple stores, so you have your distributor portal, you have your B2B site, because site search is built into the actual platform, indexing takes hold immediately and you don't need a third-party search tool. And you don't have to worry about indexing, taxing the system and slowing it down and slowing down the shopping experience.
Right.
Other things are also necessary, things like an order management tools and a sales console. So now if you are a salesperson at a manufacturer and you're working from home because of the pandemic, you can now log into your own portal or your own console and you can help your customers choose their assortment. You can order on their behalf. You can impersonate them online because sales is part of the customer experience now. It used to be that sales was sitting in the office with the purchasing agent or the buyer helping them. Well, now they're doing it online and over the phone because of the pandemic. And even as doors open, salespeople are going to want to walk in now with a tablet and they're going to want to walk their customers through new assortments and new products in a digital manner. So having this built into the overall customer experience is crucial, and marketers really need to have an eye on what I would say is sales enablement in the e-commerce world. CRM data is great for segmentation and it's great for what are the activities that are driving sales, but it's not really great on what are the activities online that the customer is doing. How do you see the customer data and the customer order data? And one of the other components that Znode also offers in that order management sales console area is also to pull in order data from the ERP that is offline order data as well. Go back and pull in 10 years of history. You're just using APIs to transfer data back and forth. And again, it creates a better sales experience and it creates a better customer experience as well. And then other things that are very traditional in B2B, approval workflows. For example, Joe, maybe you're my boss and I want to buy something and I have a limit on what I can buy. And then it has to be approved by you if I go past that limit. having workflow built into the platform to make it easier for the B2B buying experience, or list management, the ability to quickly reorder parts or quickly reorder products that are used on a regular basis versus having to shop all the time. And then things like quote management. Quotes are very common in a B2B experience. And then other things we talked about already is, complex products. How do you create a great experience? And this is built into Znode, but the ability to have like lightly configured, bundled, kitted products, where if you buy one product, you need 3 other products in order to make that product work.
Sure.
I'll pause here if there are any questions, but this is the world of customer experience now that marketers are going to have to take on as they get more and more advanced in e-commerce, because it's not just that simple B2C experience anymore for marketers.
Display a product, add it to your cart, and check out.
Yeah, that it's not that easy anymore because there's so much in that journey in B2B e-commerce that's different. Well, if there's no questions, I'll keep going, and I'm going to talk about maybe the last thing and we can wrap up because we've been here for about 40 minutes, but that is the other thing that we're seeing that really is becoming a headache for marketers and managers, e-commerce managers, is this how to manage multi-channel. They are running some sort of B2C or B2B store to get new customers. They're running their distributor portals and serving B2B customers in different ways. And then they also have to syndicate content to Amazon and Grainger, whether it's a Patagonia or whether it's a bearing manufacturer. These are the challenges right now. And one of the things we're seeing is they're doing it through multiple platforms. So now a marketer has to log into 2, 3, 4 platforms in order to manage e-commerce and manage content. And it gets very convoluted. And the only way to solve for that typically is, well, we need to hire more people. And that's not really working well either, because everybody's revenues are always, getting checked. So, the other way that Znode is helping marketers is the ability to manage multi-channel e-commerce out of one platform. And so we talked about the data model and the API first structure, but the ability to pull that ERP and CRM data in through APIs, create a B2C store, create a B2B store, stand up distributor portals, etc. Even manage things like a B2B to X business model, all out of one platform, and even global commerce, all out of one platform. And the nice thing from a marketer's perspective is all of the order management tools are centralized and you can filter by customer or store. All of your product information is centralized and can be syndicated to a specific store based upon user account or profile. All of your content is headless and can be applied at a store based upon user account or profile. I could go down the list, and the technology team is happy because they're managing one database and one administration console. So suddenly, the tech team, who maybe wasn't your friend in your previous life, now is your best friend, because life is a lot easier from a management perspective and the total cost of ownership is much lower.
Right. Yeah, no. And, that's what, as the development team, that's what we hear about regularly, right? Is how do we call it a single source of truth.
Right.
And making sure that you can manage the data that you need to manage in as few places as you can, and then display it in different ways that mean different things to different people, but managing it in a clear, concise, one technology. Not only is it a database, but it's one database technology.
Right.
And so all of those things make developers and IT folks happy.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Joe, I mean, that was some of the things that I thought were important to share when we talk about the life of a marketer today, how to help marketers, and then, from that premise that marketers' lives are getting more complex and their roles are getting more complex, and also that, commerce today, everything is e-commerce one way or another. So
right. Yeah. And, fortunately and unfortunately, as we allow marketers to do more, they have to know how to do more. Right. So like, if we're giving you the option to change pricing, then you got to be familiar with what the pricing model is going to be, or how you're going to personalize content to different channels. Well, then you got to write 2 types of content.
Right.
And so that does mean, with great power comes great responsibility, right? To do it right and use the tools, but that does put a lot more on marketers, but they also then have all the things that they've always wanted to do. And that's where the power should be, not in, hey, we want to do this one fancy thing, like let's spend $100,000 like developing it. It's like, let's spend $1,000 developing it and $99,000 marketing it.
Right.
And that's where we want those dollars to be transferred.
Or
So
we have to do this one fancy thing, but we don't need to buy 3 more platforms to do that one fancy thing.
Yeah. D, any questions coming on the chat, or do you have any for us?
Yes, there is one question in the chat, and the question is, how do you help companies prove their business case to move into e-commerce?
Well, I would actually say, Joe, as a consulting company, that would probably be more your role than a software company. But if you want to take a shot at it, I can add some color too, having grown up in your world.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing, there's a couple things. There definitely needs to be proving out some return on investment of, hey, if we do this, we will see, margins increase or sales increase or cost decrease, all of those sorts of things. But there's some intangibles too that can't necessarily be measured in well, if all of our other competitors are doing it, we have to be forced into doing this. If they're getting their orders online, that's how people want to do it. We need to do it just to stay at the same level we are. But the things that we're hearing, and Tom, you can add to this, the things off the top of my head that we're hearing about, like why people are doing B2B e-commerce, is because the buyer is kind of forcing you to, like, I want to see what your products are. I want to search for products. I want to read about them. I want to know what your bulk pricing is. And yeah, I love talking to my sales rep, but one, I can't always get them on the phone. Two, I don't have a clear way to choose it for myself or see just kind of what's out there. We even have a B2B e-commerce client that pricing changes every 15 minutes because they sell metals. And like having a self-serve world versus like, can you quote me on that? And half an hour later, it costs 10 grand more. They need to know current pricing and then click the button when they're ready versus like, hey, it takes some time to get that order. So there's some situational things as well. But Tom, adding on to that, any thoughts of things that you're hearing from as you're onboarding people the first time, what the ROI decisions are?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. One, talk to your customers. If your customers are dissatisfied with their current shopping and buying experience, your ROI will be there immediately once you give them what they want, right? We are living in a customer-centric world, and if you don't provide it or your company doesn't provide it, they will find it somewhere else. So survey your customers. And then two, maybe think about an iterative approach to this. It's very common now, especially in B2B, that you want to drive adoption. So roll out an MVP with your top 5 customers, build a program to help your customers adopt, test it on your top 5 customers or test on your worst 5 customers, right? But do a test case and a POC. And then once you have that conquered, then release the site to all customers. Would be another approach to take a look at. And I'll give you a third one. Talk to your customer service reps. Your customer service reps will tell you a couple things. Especially your customer service manager will say turnover is very high and people are frustrated. You're going to find immediate ROI when you start to take a look at e-commerce because I'll give an example, and I'm storytelling, but we have a customer that is a manufacturer of shoes, and they have 4 different brands. So they have 4 different B2C sites that are running on Znode. And they also have their distributor portal running on Znode where their independent dealers can log in and purchase. So they're running 5 total stores, if you will, on Znode. The biggest win that the customer saw on Znode was that centralized system for managing e-commerce and in their world, all commerce. And the biggest ROI they got was their customer service reps were ecstatic with the fact that they didn't have to manage orders in 4 different platforms. So what they saw is a reduction in turnover. And when there was turnover, they didn't need to replace as many people because they were only logging into one backend admin. The people could be much more efficient when they were helping manage orders. And obviously their cost of their tech stack was cut in a quarter. So, the president was happy because they spent less on technology and they reduced their turnover issue. So there's so many different ways of managing it, but and thinking about ROI, but I wouldn't look at it just only from revenue. I would look at it from cost savings, turnover savings, human capital. There's so many different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about this, and like sometimes what I hear as we're doing discovery with people is like, well, what are our salespeople going to think? Like, are they nervous they're going to lose their jobs because this is going to replace them? And it's they get to, what I've heard or seen is that they get more time to spend with their clients rather than being customer service or just getting pricing. And then as they realize that, they have clients that order from them regularly, and while they're on vacation, they get a big order from their client, submitted through the B2B portal that they're getting a commission on, and they didn't have to lift a finger while they were on vacation to get that order through the system. And like that, those are the stories that I hear from that side of it, is if those folks are nervous, it's only a benefit to them that they'll have time to build relationships, deal with the real problems rather than push paper and get things through. So I know that there's like return on investment there, and potentially not as many salespeople, but it isn't like a reduction in force necessarily that we're hearing about.
No, I've heard many stories of happier salespeople because they have the tools that they need to get that data real time to consult with customers versus filling out paperwork.
Yeah, let me show you. I'll log into your portal as you. This is how you do this. This is how you look at the current pricing. This is how you can submit an order, all of those things, like live, and showing them past purchase history, even if hey, you can go look at your purchase history, but let me I can show you your purchase history and we can talk about it, right? Like, and you have access to the same information.
Absolutely.
D, I know that was a long answer, but it's a really good question. Any other questions come about, or are we kind of getting close to time? Talked longer than we anticipated.
I don't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Okay. So I think I'm ready to wrap. If that, Tom, any final thoughts or notes or?
No, I would just say if anybody has any questions following the webinar, reach out to Fjorge, reach out to Joe, and if I can help in any way, pull me onto a call, and would love to connect with anybody who has any interest in this.
Yep, great. And D, any closing thoughts? Or I know that you said a couple of things about that this will be sent out after the call is recorded and given to you. Anything else that folks need to know?
Yep, it'll be sent out along with Joe and Tom's contact information. So if you do have any questions that weren't answered, feel free to send it to them.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and answering any questions that we can along the way.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.